Israel should have anything to do with the West Bank. So I do believe that's a better solution than a single state. The 3 wars failed to do that. Why should Israel say, okay, now we won 3 wars, and now we're going to let peace just do away with our Jewish state? I'm sorry, I just can't do that.
Well, I mean, I won't go back into all the history because it's late, but of course the so-called Jewish state under the partition plan would have been on the majority of the land, and it would have had 40% Palestinian population. That's even if you accept the notion of partition. But in the partition resolution, if you go and read it, it says that both of the states that were proposed by the UN, without the consent of the people of the country, would have to have strict equality among all their populations regardless of religion. So the UN partition resolution never mandated or authorized a racist state that can discriminate against people based on their religion. So you cannot use the UN partition to justify Israel's claim to be a so-called Jewish state, because what it called for was 2 states with equal civil rights for all the people who live in them. Just go read the resolution.
It was called a Jewish state.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it was.
I've read it. You obviously haven't. Yes, you have.
Thank you for taking questions. A few. One is, I guess, at the end of your political vision, do you have a sense of what the name of the single state would be and what would happen to the name of Israel? Another question is also at the, I guess you would call it the end, although nothing's ever the end. What happens to what is now the law of return? Would Jews who are not Israeli citizens, what relationship legally and politically would they have with this single state? And a third question is in part related to what you see the role of the BDS movement as, in particular in terms of uniting, if that's possible, the different segments of Palestinian society politically. And what, of course nobody has a crystal ball, but how do you see getting to this state when you have one leadership in the West Bank, another leadership in Gaza, and ministers of the Knesset, who I'm not quite sure how they're related to either of those leaderships within the state of Israel?
Yeah. Well, that's some very good questions. The name, I don't know. But if that is the last problem, I think we would find a resolution. The Palestinians will probably never stop calling it Palestine. They never have stopped calling it Palestine. And I just really don't care what people call it as long as they all have equal rights.
Ali Abunimah and Company.
Sorry?
We call it Ali Abunimah and Company.
I think it's important to try to lay out principles for any such state. And one effort that I was part of a few years ago is something called the One State Declaration. If you just Google it, you'll find it online. And this was an effort which came out of a conference that was in Madrid, and it's signed by a number of people, including Palestinians, some Israelis, and others. And we really worked very hard on it. It was very hard. And we tried to lay out some principles. And we were inspired by, and I think it has to be read as a whole. You can't pick and choose the clauses. But we did take the South African Freedom Charter, we did look at the Belfast Agreement, and of course we looked at the particulars of Palestine and Israel. And the 2 first principles, again, in a decolonized state, when you have equality, is that the historic land of Palestine belongs to all who live in it, and to those who are expelled or exiled from it since 1948, regardless of religion, ethnicity, national origin, or current citizenship status. So that's one principle. The second, any system of government must be founded on the principle of equality in civil, political, social, and cultural rights for all citizens. Power must be exercised with rigorous impartiality on behalf of all people in the diversity of their identities. The state should be non-sectarian, the creation of a non-sectarian state that does not privilege the rights of one ethnic or religious group over another, and that respects the separation of state from all organized religion. The recognition of the diverse character of the society encompassing distinct religious, linguistic, and cultural traditions and national experiences. That's already the reality. It's a question of recognizing it. And the implementation of the right of return for Palestinian refugees in accordance with UN resolution, etc., and the creation of a transparent and non-discriminatory immigration policy. The recognition of the historic connections between the diverse communities inside the new democratic state and their respective fellow communities outside. What that recognition would look like and how it would be actualized, I don't know. That's a matter for discussion, but that would include, of course, relations between Palestinians and Palestinian diasporic communities, between Arab Jews inside the country and Arab Jews outside the country, and other Jewish communities and so on. So recognize that there are not, Jews are not the only ones who have a community beyond the borders of the country that has relationships and historic connections there. So those are some principles that we laid out with an explicit invitation for people to discuss them, to develop them, to argue about them. And that's the first step, but others have to engage in it. You know, I can't stand here and give you all the answers. I can give you the problems. It has to be a wider discussion. In terms of your question about Palestinian leadership, I think it is a problem of the current situation. You have a very explicit policy of the United States as the main actor that has decided to, there was an election in 2006 in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, that Hamas won. It was on ceasefire at the time. There was a unilateral ceasefire, and it was basically begging for engagement. Still is. And the model there that I have proposed, and I think is very relevant, was the IRA model of bringing Hamas into a political process, which it clearly wanted, which is why it entered the election. The United States approach was to cut them off, blockade them, boycott them, and to prop up an undemocratic regime in the West Bank that is a collaborationist regime. It's a puppet regime of the Israelis in Ramallah that has no democratic legitimacy whatsoever. So this is supported by policies of showering aid on the West Bank, isolating Gaza, boycotting Hamas. I don't support Hamas, but they are a part of the Palestinian community. They've been part of the resistance. They've made enormous, many people from Hamas have died. They don't share their political vision at all. I think their political vision has been quite incoherent, particularly their adoption of the two-state solution at the time when it has become obviously impossible to implement. But nevertheless, it's impossible to get around them. They have to be recognized. They have to be seen as part of the Palestinian community. They have enormous support. That's a reality. So I think that among Palestinians, there is an enormous desire for reconciliation, but there are huge external. No, I don't want to blame it entirely on external blocks, but I would say that's the principal block at this time. And if Israel were to end these forms of discrimination that prevent Palestinians from meeting each other, from traveling, from moving, I think it would be quite easy for Palestinians to develop a common leadership and vision. There's tremendous leadership among Palestinians. If you look at some of the grassroots leaders on the ground, Haneen Zabi, who spoke yesterday, did anyone go and hear her? Yeah. What did you think? Isn't she incredible?
Haneen Zabi?
Yeah.
She's a true leader.
A true leader. Of course. We have to wrap up, our call. We're done.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.